Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Chamber of the Wraith. My name is Brian, and tonight we're going to be tackling something I've been thinking about for quite some time now. Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe 2. Now, if you've not played Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe before, the original one, it was the last 3D era Mortal Kombat game. The last Mortal Kombat game made by Midway. And the first time that what would become NetherRealm Studios would work on DC characters. The first time that a story mode would be featured in the game, focusing on the characters and their struggles as worlds collide in combat. But this wouldn't be the last time that DC and Mortal Kombat would cross over. And there's been a few times where I have played Injustice or Mortal Kombat 11 and thought, well, what if they did Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe 2 as their next game? What if it isn't Injustice 3, or MK12, or the horror fighting game, or the Marvel game, or any of the dozens of theories that have been out there for NetherRealm Studios? Well, I'd say we would be off to a pretty good start for a theory video, wouldn't you say? So, join me tonight as we dive into the possibilities of Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe 2.
Batman.
Which of these costume vigilantes are least likely to kill you, intentionally or otherwise?
What a starting point, too. Because I think we have the perfect example of how the roster should look. Not by the ratio of DC characters to Mortal Kombat characters, because right now it's literally 1 to 30. However, with Injustice Gods Among Us, we have the perfect roster split. We have an even amount of heroes and an even amount of villains, or anti-heroes, as is the case with Scorpion. However, because of this split between the heroes and the villains, we can actually begin to build our Mortal Kombat and DC roster this way. And we're only looking at the launch roster here. Of course, DLC doesn't really matter. And because of how this game is going to work, being equal sides on either side, I'm going to begin by denoting that we will have a 26 character roster. Now, the reason why I say specifically 26 characters is because that is a fairly high amount to start off with for a NetherRealm game. Injustice started with 24, Mortal Kombat X started with 25 if you count the pre-order bonus, which is Goro. Injustice had 28, 29 if you count Darkseid, and then we went back to 24 with Mortal Kombat 11. So, we're going to have 26 as our nice middle ground. That means 13 DC characters and 13 Mortal Kombat characters. So, let's rattle off who I think is I'm going to rattle off the most likely and, quite frankly, the most obvious characters to make it into the game.
Batman. Superman. Wonder Woman. Green Lantern. The Joker. Catwoman. Lex Luthor. Bane.
And we already have 8. So, that is Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern with Joker, Catwoman, Lex Luthor, and Bane. And we can even round out the top 10 with
Harley Quinn
and
The Flash.
Because Harley Quinn is stupid popular, and The Flash is Ed Boon's favorite DC character. There is no way that these guys are going to miss out. Not a chance. Then we're going to have to pop over to... Then we're going to add one more from Injustice 1, and then pop over to Injustice 2 to flesh out the rest of the roster. So, who is that one more? Well, we're going to have to fit in somebody new. Somebody who has not been in a Mortal Kombat fighter before, in a DC fighter in a long time, and is damn brutal.
Lobo.
Yep, I'm talking Lobo. And Lobo would be a really good fit because he is a brutal character and can also act as a sort of comedic foil, considering his crude sense of humor. So to recap, so far for our DC roster, we have Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and the Flash for the good guys. And then we have for the bad guys, Joker, Harley Quinn, Catwoman, Lex Luthor, Lobo, and Bane. So, how does that split up so far? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, so we're going to need a couple more heroes and one more villain to flesh everything out. Actually, wait a minute, I think we're at 11 now, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, so we're going to need a couple more characters and then we're set. And for that, we're going to jump over to Injustice 2. And yes, I know that I'm only bringing up 2 characters from Injustice 2 specifically. However, the thing to note is that only a handful of the characters, in fact, I don't think any of the characters that I have brought up are from specifically Injustice 1, except for Lex Luthor and Lobo. So, to help flesh things out, we're going to have 2 representatives from Injustice 2, basically because that helps kind of fill out the roster in its entirety. So, for those who need a quick recap, it's Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, The Flash, Joker, Harley Quinn, Lex Luthor, Catwoman, Harley Quinn, Bane, and Lobo. Wait, was that 11? Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, The Flash, Joker, Harley Quinn, Catwoman, Lex Luthor, Lobo, and Bane. Okay, I lost count for a second. Yeah, so it is 11, sorry. And of those characters, only 2 of them are exclusives, Lobo and Lex Luthor. So why don't we grab a couple of characters that are exclusive to Injustice 2 to fill out the roster. And I think number 12 and number 13 are going to be
Red Hood.
And a surprise pick, because we need a villain in order to fill out the slots. Now, Darkseid doesn't really fit this motif, but Darkseid was a nice default, as it were. The kind of thing that you go, oh, wait a second, of course it would be Darkseid. Brainiac is a nice curveball, but again, he's not a magic character. That leaves us with 2 real options, and one of them is a villain, and one of them is very popular. Sorry, I should say.
Enchantress.
Yep, I'm thinking we should make Enchantress the main bad guy for the DC side in Injustice, or Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe 2. She has incredible magical power. She would make an allegiance with somebody in order to consume both the worlds of DC and Mortal Kombat, and we need more female bad guys. Kronika was a bit of a fumbling start, but I think a lot more people would be happy to see Enchantress as the DC's main bad guy for the DC side. Now, admittedly, this does mean that we don't have very many magical characters at this point, but that's kind of what DLC is for. And, of course, the roster could change at any time. Wonder Woman being a magic-inclined character would help make sense as a magic representative. But now we need to move on to the Mortal Kombat side of things. And, of course, Scorpion is going to be on the roster alongside these 2 fellows.
Sub-Zero. Raiden.
They are the poster child of Mortal Kombat. No way, no how is anybody going to say, yeah, Raiden and Sub-Zero are going to skip a Mortal Kombat game. They are the shoo-ins. In fact, Raiden and Sub-Zero... In fact, Sub-Zero is the only Mortal Kombat character to be in every single Mortal Kombat game. Raiden was not in Mortal Kombat 3 and was not playable in the original version of Mortal Kombat 4. Scorpion also skipped Mortal Kombat 3. So, Sub-Zero is technically the true poster child because he was in every single game. But to flesh out the Mortal Kombat roster, we need to expand to Mortal Kombat. Of course. Just as a super quick recap before we get into the Mortal Kombat roster, one thing worth noting is that there are some characters on the DC side that are from MK vs. DC 1 that won't be making it into this particular roster for MK vs. DC 2. And for those of you who are wondering who those are, that's Deathstroke, Lobo, and Captain Marvel. I mostly just excluded them just by process of elimination, but there's always the chance that they could come back as DLC or replace one of the characters I mentioned. I'm just giving my possible thoughts here. Now we come to Mortal Kombat 9, because every single character that I could be looking for in an MK vs. DC roster is here. Why would I look here? Every classic character. All of them. From Scorpion to Smoke, from Rain to Kano. They're all here. And I personally feel that if they're going to make an MK vs. DC, there is no way in hell that they are going to do so without using either a majority of or exclusively classic era characters. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that this was basically the case for the original Mortal Kombat vs. DC universe. But there's a few characters, but just like just like the DC side, the MK side is going to be missing a few people from MK vs. DC 1. Those characters, for those who are curious, are the following: Kano, Baraka, and Shao Kahn. Oh, Darkseid, I said as well. Did I say Darkseid? Because hopefully I meant to say Darkseid for the DC side. Both of the hidden bosses will not be returning. Baraka won't be returning, and neither will Kano on this particular list. However, everybody here is going to be from either from MK1 to MK3, and I'm going to list them off in the order I have written down now.
Sub-Zero, Scorpion, Raiden, Sonya, Johnny Cage, Liu Kang, Jax, Shiva, Mileena, Kitana, Cyrax, Sector,
and last but not least,
Shang Tsung.
Now you might be wondering why I picked these characters specifically, and why it's so heavy on the MK1 front. I gotta be honest, I wasn't intending on it being so heavy on the Mortal Kombat 1 characters. Personally, I would have loved to somehow fit Scarlet in, but considering that we've kind of ended up with only classic characters and everybody remembers the MK1 characters, it just kind of happened that way. However, I did intentionally want to replace Kano with Johnny Cage, because I feel like Johnny Cage is more well-liked and could add a comedic angle, similar to why I added Lobo in the first place. Both of these characters would be the sort of comic relief, alongside kind of the Flash, but more so Lobo and Johnny Cage as comic relief for their respective games. Liu Kang, of course, is already from the Mortal Kombat vs. DC universe, and I already explained why the first three are here. Scorpion, Sub-Zero, and Raiden are the poster boys, and there isn't a chance in hell that they're going to be skipped. Now, what about my other representatives? Why, for instance, did I pick Shiva when I could have just as easily picked Kung Lao? Well, Shiva, I think, is a more interesting character to mess around with fighting-wise. Now, Kung Lao is a very good character, of course, with his hat weapon and his teleports and all that. But Mortal Kombat doesn't generally have a lot of grappler archetypes, and Bane fits the grappler archetype perfectly for the DC side, So why not let Shiva be the resident grappler for Mortal Kombat? She kind of fits that niche in MK9 when people aren't abusing Stomp to death, but she works as that grappler. Similarly, Mileena and Kitana are some of the most iconic Mortal Kombat females, and of course, you know how people reacted when Mileena did not show up at Mortal Kombat 11. They were begging for her to return. Much similar to how people would react if Kitana didn't show up. Unfortunately, due to how the roster ended up being structured, Jade kinda misses out, but there's always a possibility for DLC, you know. Then I needed more Mortal Kombat 3 representation. And I don't think there is a pair of characters that better represents MK3 than the Cyborgs. Particularly when they're going against DC characters. Now, the thing about the Borgs is that these guys are also really popular. And they kind of represent what Mortal Kombat 3 was, because Mortal Kombat 3 was a weird game. I mean, think about it. We had a vigilante speedster attacked by Shao Kahn's extermination squads. We have a literal cop, and we have not one, not two, but three. He's not a cyber, but let me roll with this for a second. Cyber ninjas. Hell, the term cyber ninja was a weird one before they decided to implement it into Mortal Kombat 3. And for the weird side of classic MK, I don't think the Borgs have any competition for the best representation. And plus, who the hell doesn't want to play as the cyborg fighting Batman? And finally, we come to Shang Tsung. And if you're curious, yes, Shang Tsung is indeed the Mortal Kombat sub-boss. He's the sub-boss alongside the Enchantress before the final boss is revealed. And what is that final boss? Well, basically what you would expect, a Shang Enchantress hybrid. However, there's something a little bit different to be had.
Shang Tsung, Sub-Zero.
If you pick the Mortal Kombat side, I wanted to do this specifically. Shang Tsung is dominant. He'll gain access to Enchantress's special moves alongside his own, like Fire Skull and Soul Steel. But Soul Steel will have a different effect in this form. But he will also have his own, he will have only his normals. So, you know, if you really wanted to, you can have combos based off of Shang Tsung. Hang on. And I messed that up. But you can have Shang Tsung normals with Enchantress specials chained into Shang Tsung specials. And if the DC side wins, well, you'll have Enchantress winning, taking over Shang Tsung, and having access to Shang Tsung specials like the Soul Steel and the spicy skulls. If I can come out of that. There we go. But she will have Enchantress's normals, just to keep things fresh. And there would be two different versions of the same boss to keep things spicy. That's about what I got for the roster, but I want to know what you guys think. Who would you guys pick if you had 26 options for a Mortal Kombat vs. DC 2? And who would you have for the final boss? Don't forget to be awesome, my friends, and maybe we'll tackle this idea a little more in detail on the Wraithcast, and I'll see you guys on the other side. Toodaloo!